The Rajput, having caused his son to kneel before the goddess, struck him so violently a blow that his head rolled upon the ground. He then threw the sword down. When his daughter frantically was in grief, snatched the knife up and struck her neck with such force that her head separated from her body and fell. In this terror, the mother, unable to survive the loss of the children, took the weapon and killed herself too. Now 𝗙𝗪𝗪, beholding all of this slaughter, said, "My children are dead. Why now should I remain in servitude, and upon whom shall I bestow the gold I received from the king?" He then gave himself so deep a wound in the neck that his head also separated from his body. King Rupsen, seeing these 4 heads on the ground, said in his heart, "For my sake has the family of 𝗙𝗪𝗪 been destroyed?" He then took up the sword and was about to slay himself when the goddess quickly said to stop. In the meantime, the king, dressed all in black, followed 𝗙𝗪𝗪 to see what he will do next. 𝗙𝗪𝗪 reached the cemetery, and there he sees a beautiful woman loaded with jewels from head to toe, holding a horn in her right and a necklace in her left. Sometimes she danced, sometimes she jumped, sometimes she ran about. There was no tear in her eye at all, but beating her head and making lamentable cries, she kept dashing herself on the ground. Seeing her condition, 𝗙𝗪𝗪 did not recognize the goddess that she was, but still inquired, "Who are you, my lady? Why are you crying so much? What is the cause of your grief?" She then replied, saying, "I am the royal luck." 𝗙𝗪𝗪 asked, "For what reason? Why are you crying?" The goddess then began to relate her position to the Rajput. She said with tears, "In the king's palace, Shudra is supposed to be done. Hence, misfortune will certainly fall upon it, and I shall forsake it. After a month has passed, the king, having endured excessive affliction, will die. In grief for this, I weep. I have brought much happiness to the king's house, and hence I am full of regret that this my prediction cannot in any way prove to be untrue." 𝗙𝗪𝗪 was worried. The king dying, what will happen to the kingdom? So 𝗙𝗪𝗪 immediately asked, "Is there any other way to make sure that the king's life is saved?" The goddess said, "Yes, there is. About 8 miles to the east, you will find a temple dedicated to my terrible sister Devi. Offer her your son's head, cut off with your own hands, and then the king shall live for an entire age." 𝗙𝗪𝗪 answered not a word, but quickly rushed to his house. The king, still in black, not being able to see by anybody, followed 𝗙𝗪𝗪 quietly. 𝗙𝗪𝗪 straight went to his wife from the cemetery and woke her up and told her everything that happened. When she heard that, she immediately woke her son and daughter, and 𝗙𝗪𝗪 then told them everything that had happened and asked them to follow him to the temple of Devi in the woods. On the way to the temple, 𝗙𝗪𝗪 said to his wife, "If you will give up your son willingly, I will sacrifice him for our master's sake to Devi the destroyer." 𝗙𝗪𝗪's wife replied, "Father and mother, son and daughter, brother and relative, I have now nobody. You are everything to me. It is written in the scripture that a wife is not made pure by gifts to priests, nor by performing religious rites. Her virtue consists in waiting upon her husband, in obeying him and in loving him. Maybe he might be lame, maimed in the hands, dumb, deaf, blind, one-eyed, leprous, or hunchbacked. It is true saying that a son under one's authority, a body free from sickness, a desire to acquire knowledge, an intelligent friend, and an obedient wife. Whoever holds these 5 will find themselves people of happiness. An unwilling servant a parsimonious king, an insincere friend, and a wife who's not under control. Such things are disturbers of ease and givers of trouble. Then the wife turned to her son and said, "Child, by the gift of your head, the king's life may be spared, and the kingdom remains unshaken." The child replied, "Mother, in my opinion, we should really quickly go and get this thing done. Firstly, I must obey your command, and secondly, I must promote the interests of my master. Thirdly, if this body be of any use to a goddess, there can be nothing better than this in the world." The son again addressed to 𝗙𝗪, "Father, whoever can be of use to his master, the life of that man in this world has been lived to a good purpose already, and by reason of his usefulness, he will be rewarded in the other world." His sister, however, said, "If a mother should give poison to her daughter, and a father sell his son, and a king seize the entire property of his subjects, where then could one look for protection?" But they did not listen to her and continued talking as they journeyed towards the temple of Devi, the king all the while secretly following them. Once they reached, there was a single room surrounded by a spacious area, in front of which was an immense building capable of sitting hundreds of people. Before the image there were pools of blood where victims had lately been slaughtered. In the sanctum was a Devi, a large black figure with 10 arms. With a spear in one of her right hands, she pierced the giant Mahesha. With one of her left hands, she held the tail of a serpent and the hair of the giant, whose breast the serpent was eating. Her other arms were all raised above her head and were filled with different instruments of war. Against her right leg leaned a lion. Now 𝗙𝗪 joined his hands in prayer and with the Hindu mildness addressed the awful goddess, "O mother, let the king's life be prolonged for 1,000 years by the sacrifice of my son. O Devi, mother, destroy his enemies, kill, reduce them to ashes, drive them away, devour them, cut them into two, drink their blood, destroy them root and branch with thy thunderbolt, spear." The Rajput, having caused his son to kneel before the goddess, struck him so violently a blow that his head rolled upon the ground. He then threw the sword down, when his daughter frantically was in grief, snatched the knife up and struck her neck with such force that her head separated from her body and fell. In this terror, the mother, unable to survive the loss of the children, took the weapon and killed herself too. Now 𝗙𝗪, beholding all of this slaughter, said, "My children are dead. Why now should I remain in servitude, and upon whom shall I bestow the gold I received from the king?" He then gave himself so deep a wound in the neck that his head also separated from his body. King Rupsen, seeing these 4 heads on the ground, said in his heart, "For my sake has the family of 𝗙𝗪 been destroyed? Kingly power, for the purpose of upholding which the destruction of a whole household is necessary, is a mere curse, and to carry on government in this manner is not just." He then took up the sword and was about to slay himself, when the goddess quickly said to stop. King Rupsen was about to kill himself too, but the goddess, probably satisfied with bloodshed, stayed his hand, bidding him at the same time ask any boon he pleased. The generous monarch begged thereupon that his faithful servant might be restored to life, together with all his high-minded family. And the goddess Devi, in the twinkling of an eye, fetched from Patala, the regions below the earth, a vase full of Amrita, the water of immortality, sprinkled it upon the dead, and raised them all as before. After which the whole party walked leisurely home, and in due time the king divided his throne with his friend 𝗙𝗪. Having stopped for a moment, The Betal proceeded to remark in a sentence, "Happy the servant who grudges not on his own life to save that of his master, and happy thrice the happy master who can annihilate all greedy longing for existence and worldly prosperity. Raja, I have to ask thee one searching question. Of these five, who was the greatest fool?" "You demon!" exclaimed Raja Vikram. All those who cherished feelings about fidelity and family affliction, obedience, and high mindedness were outraged by this vampire's view of the question. "If thou meanest by the greatest fool the noblest mind, I reply without hesitating that King Rupsen." "Why? Why King Rupsen?" "Because Birbal was bound to offer up his life for a master who treated him so generously. The son could not disobey his father, and the woman naturally and instinctively killed themselves because the example was set to them. But Rupsen, the king, gave up his throne for the sake of his retainer, and valued not a straw his life and his high inducements to live. For this reason, I think the king as the most meritorious. Surely, mighty Vikram, you will be tired of ever clambering upon this tree, even if you had legs and arms of a Hanuman himself." And saying so, Betal disappeared again onto the tree.